So this is where we did the last slide we did. Just this we have done. This also we have done. Now, duty to participate. Yes, why he not allows people, the category of people he does not allow. He has given his reasons as totally, and why he has justified slavery. I think I explained it to you, but did we write anything on it? Why he has justified it? Okay. Okay, so today we'll write it also. Slavery is good. As per the ancient Greek great thinker Aristotle, slavery is good. Now, there is a reason he is saying so. He is having his own reasons for it. Slaves lack reason. His reason is that slaves lack reason, and slaves also lack courage. They are found in masters. They here means the traits. Reason and courage are found in masters. So master has quality to take rational decisions. Why? Because he is having traits like courage and reason. So slave is devoid of these two traits. So slave cannot kind of take rational decisions. Master can always take that. Slavery is good for whom? Slave. First point, slavery is good for slave. Why? Because he cannot live without his master. He is an incompetent guy. He is someone who is lacking the various traits that are needed for survival. So, slavery is first thing first, good for slave himself. In the company of master, slave too will develop some virtue. He said that the company, choose your company wisely, because it's actually true that we all have effect of our company. Someone famously said that you are the sum total of five individuals with whom you have spent the maximum time span in your life. So Plato also thinks that the more time slave spends with his master, the more virtuous he will become. Maybe master will become more dumb, because if it's infectious, it can be both ways, right? So, but here, what is the assumption of Aristotle? That slave will also develop some virtues. Now, master will also benefit. Why? Because he will get more time to develop virtue and focus on important stuffs rather than menial work. Now, master is not supposed to cook for himself, to clean his house, to arrange his clothes and books and whatever things that have to be done. Okay, so all these things, all these menial work will be taken care by the slave. So master will have more time at his disposal, and because of this more time, he will take some higher pursuits. He will develop more of his virtues. He will contemplate more. He will learn more, because he should not waste his reason and courage on doing degraded things. Slave is there to take care. This is what Aristotle says. Third, who will benefit? The economy will benefit. How? Slaves are physically strong. Okay. Have you seen the images of slaves? The all those ancient and medieval images. They had a very good physique, and still they were slaves. So he's saying that slaves are physically strong, so they can work for long duration, and that would benefit the economy. So it's rather parochial views of thing, but then we have to remember that every thinker is a prisoner of his times, and there was nothing better that Aristotle can come up in 4th century BCE of Greece. So this is what he tells us. These are the three reasons that he gives us. Questions, anyone here? It's very simply put. My content is very simple that I put here. So I don't think the language is uh, any kind of tough here. Did you understand it? So Aristotle now comes on property. Now, before we examine Aristotle's view on property, do you remember what Plato said on property? You should, because we have seen these things. What he said on property? No private property. No, not for everyone, but for whom? For philosopher king, the ruling class. Very correct. All of you are giving the right answer. Good. So he says that philosopher king should not have any property, any family, so on and so forth. He said, yes, king should have no property, no wife or no husband. If it's a queen, he also talks about philosopher queen, right? So what is Aristotle saying on the same? See, Aristotle is the greatest disciple of Plato and also greatest critic of Plato. So he will not agree with his mentor all the time. Aristotle supports private property because it's a product of intellect and hard work. That's how you make money. If you are making fair money through legitimate and fair means, then how do you make it? Through your intellect and your hard work. So that's what he's saying. It's a product of intellect and hard work. He does not approve of property earned through unfair means. He's not taking the unfair means. He's ethical. Okay, so he's saying that through ethical means through your intellect, whatever kind of questions. Why not? Why not? Have you never disagreed with your teacher, Archita? Her question is, how can we say he is guru of Aristotle when he opposes him? Does not oppose on everything, but on some things. All the time. Why? Why not? Remember, they are coming from the Socrates school of thought. And Socrates says, ask questions. Socrates favors dialectics. Did you forget that? So, someone who has been trained virtuously on the process of dialectics by none other than Socrates, how can he oppose when his disciple says something else? I'm talking about Plato. Dialectic means there will be disagreements. Are you getting it? So this is the view of Aristotle on property. He rejects communism in property. Says no. The communist view, that is, let there be common property for everyone, is a faulty one. Okay, that do not go for communism in property and everything. No need to do that. He rejects common ownership and individual use because it will be exploitative in nature. Now, what is common ownership and individual use? I'll give you an example. Something that is maintained out of state fund but used by the individual, used by an elite. Can you tell me any such thing? Ever been to Delhi? Or why Delhi? In your own city, Hyderabad? I was expecting this, Rashtrapati Bhavan. Now, where does the expense of president come from? Let us talk IGP, Indian Government and Politics, Part B of Paper 1. Where does the expense of president come from? From the CFI, the Consolidated Fund of India. Who contributes to the Consolidated Fund of India? Yes, charged on. So we are also contributing to, no, not taxes are not the only component. There are other components as well. Okay, so of course tax being one of the component. So the thing is that we also contribute to the taxpayer, and it is, can you go and stay for a night at Rashtrapati Bhavan? That my tax has gone into the maintenance of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Forget about staying at Rashtrapati Bhavan. If you stay at Raisena Hills, and this is a very personal and wide experience which all of us can go through. If you stay at Raisena Hills, you understand Raisena Hills is the uh, that Choraha next to Rashtrapati Bhavan in the very close vicinity. If you stay there for more than 2 minutes, a security wala will come and ask you, what are you doing here for the past 5 minutes? What are you trying to do? Why are you here for so long? Are you waiting for something? So forget staying about in Rashtrapati Bhavan. So it's an example of common ownership but individual use. Now there is no common ownership in Rashtrapati Bhavan, but resources are common. It's our taxpayers' money that goes into it. In ancient time, what used to happen? Ownership, like people have contributing through tax. Then it's also translates into ownership. So individual can use it. But when most of the resources would be same of this nature, common ownership and individual use, then the regime would turn exploitative. Correct? Right? Nothing discrepant here. It's a very simple thing. Next, he supports individual ownership and common use. Individual ownership and common use. Now, what would be individual ownership and common use? It would be like, it will promote charity and self-worth. Like ownership it individual. I am having my things and I will decide whether you can use it or not. Like, I'll tell you, so temples are owned by the state. Don't you know that? There is a case going on around temple. Jay Sai Deepak, lawyer, is passionately fighting for it. Have you heard his name? So what happens is temples are not. Temples belong to the state. Individual property, like if Mr. Ambani says that I am letting out my Antila, okay, you have heard about it. I am letting out my Antila for the slum dwellers of Mumbai until we get a, yeah, Swami also is fighting for it. Of course, Dr. Swami is fighting for it. These two people are at forefront. Subramanian Swami and J. Sai Deepak for the transferring of that proper. Yes, yes. My bad. So I will decide who will bat. Okay, Krishna. Yes. So that state does not manage the temple. So he supports individual ownership. Like Gandhi staying in the Birla farmhouse. Gandhiji Birla was a very close friend. You know this. Uh, Birla Mandir in Delhi was because of insistence of Gandhi ji. I have included that example today. I want you to see that in few minutes we'll come to it. The thing is that I will decide whether you can use my property. Okay, so it will promote charity. Like philanthropy will be promoted, and it will enhance the self-worth that I have something in plenty. I can make people feel good with it. I can share my virtues. Okay, so it's total the supports individual ownership and common use. Let the individual decide whether he will allow it for common use. He should. This is what Plato says, that he should do that. Why he should do that? Because it will promote charity, it will promote self-worth. No questions here? No questions, I guess. Which third point, Sam? This one? Okay. Suppose there is an institution. I gave the example of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Yes, I'm explaining. Because that's what I'm explaining. Because Rashtrapati Bhavan is maintained by the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, in these times, in modern democratic constitutional times, you and me cannot say that we are also owners of Rashtrapati Bhavan. But a king's palace, okay, in ancient Greek time, which was maintained by the revenue, something similar to Rashtrapati Bhavan, and it can be said that this belongs to the state, but is exclusively used by the king. When you are on in a different country and you see image of Rashtrapati Bhavan, you will say that this belongs to us. Us. You will not say it belongs to me. This is my address, President House, Rasena Hills. You cannot do that. You can say, yeah, this belongs to us. Correct. But individual is using it. Rashtrapati alone is using it. So these things of this design, if implemented on majority of resources, it will make the regime exploitative. Did you understand this? Now no issues to anyone? Now see the next thing. Man is a social animal. Society contributes in the prosperity and growth of a man. We all agree to this? The society does contribute in the prosperity and growth of a man. So he should contribute a part of property for well-being of society. He should contribute a part of property for well-being of society. This is the idea of trusteeship. Gandhiji talks about that. When we study Western political thought, we will soon come to Karl Marx. And Marx, being the enemy of private property, being the enemy of capitalism, will be dead against the capitalists. Now, Gandhi and Marx Gandhi and Marx have two major differences. Please try to understand this. First, Marx supports violence. Gandhi does not approve of violence largely. He is very selective about violence. That we shall see. But Marx is completely in support of violence. Second thing, Marx would say that private property should be abolished, capitalism should be destroyed. Gandhi says, no, no, no. Let there be private property, let there be capitalists, but these capitalists should do charity work, trusteeship. And it was because of him, the Birla Mandir in Delhi, G.D. Birla was inspired by Gandhi. Yes, something like corporate social responsibility. There was a question in your main exam in history, paper 1 GS, contemporary relevance of Gandhi. You cannot say non-violence. You need to quote trusteeship, connect it with corporate social responsibility. Did you understand? We all talk about CSR, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, the legendary billionaires. So connect it with Gandhi used to say. Contemporary relevance of Gandhi पूछा था ना आपके main में. History GS paper 1. So you connect it with that. Do not say non-violence. Non-violence is not relevant today. At least how Gandhi meant it. Okay. So he is the one in modern times who talks about trusteeship, and also Aristotle talks about it. That you are the repository of capital and you alone have not done everything. An industrialist, a Mukesh Ambani needs some food. So who grows that food? Ambani does not grow, the poor farmer does that. He needs certain cloth. So there is someone working in cloth mills to manufacture that cloth. Someone must be pressing his clothes, right? Someone must be washing his clothes. Someone must be making the food that he eats. So how can you say that everything that I have done, everything that I am looking like is my sole contribution? Cannot say that. And there must be some products which will not be manufactured by Reliance and will be used by Ambani, something or the other. So how can you say? And suppose he's sleeping on a bed. So is he making a bed? So can he stay without sleep for all his life? So the thing is that society has contributed providing them with comfort, by providing them with food and sleep and so on and so forth, basic necessities of life. So you need to return it to society. Okay. Gandhian view this is, or considering chronology, I would say that Gandhi was inspired by Aristotle, but Aristotle in turn was maybe inspired because someone before Aristotle has said this. Can you tell me who? Hint, from India. The thought comes from India actually, not from. It's not an original thought of Greece. Tell me if you are aware. Not Kautilya. Kautilya is a contemporary, not Buddha. Again, one more hint, and I think you will answer it. Contemporary of Buddha, the other god. Yes, yes. Now everyone will. Yes, Mahavir Jain. That's why I put this note. Gandhian views on property are same. Okay, read this. Started donation and philanthropy. The Goenkas, the Bajaj, not the Bajaj, but Birlas. Birla Mandir in Delhi. Aristotle gave earliest expression of trusteeship in Greece. In India, Jainism, the theory of non-attachment or non-possession on aparigraha. See, Jainism is based on Panch Mahabharat, it's called, the five vows. Okay, so one of those five vows is aparigraha. Do you know the other four? Okay, leave the Sanskrit or the Pali terms. I'll tell you the what are they. Do not steal, do not tell a lie, a parigraha, which is do not store more than what is required, non-violence, and celibacy, brahmacharya. These are the Panch Mahabharat of Jains. So they also say if you are, Gandhi said that if you are having, and Gandhiji was inspired by this Jainist philosophy a lot. The trusteeship he did not learn from Aristotle but from Jainism. Gandhiji for sure. Same thing he said that if you are possessing more than what you are needing right now, yes, yes, you are right, Subhana. Ahimsa, Satya, Astya, Brahmacharya, Parigraha. But then I don't know if everyone has read this, so I was not going into the technical things. Anyways, it will come very handy in Indian political thought. Then I'll tell you about it. Very correct. So Gandhiji says that if you are uh, having need of two pair of clothes, and if you are having three, you are a thief because you are storing more than that is needed. You should know a parigraha. Okay, so we see the same views that Aristotle and Gandhi have, and what Jains used to say. The Jain Tirthankars, the Jain Mahagurus. There have been how many Tirthankars? Any idea? 24 Tirthankars. Mahavir Jain was the 24th Tirthankar. Tirthankars are the Jain Gurus. Rishabdev was the first, Pasharnath was the 23rd, and 24th was Mahavir. And their position is superior to God in Jainism. Do you know this? Okay, come back to Western political thought. Aristotle. No. That was Aristanemi. Friend of Krishna was Aristanemi, as they say, not Mahavir Jain. Now, another thing that we have to study here, justice. Aristotle's view on justice. It's unjust to treat equals unequally, and it's equally unjust to treat unequals equally. What does this mean? You know what it means? It tells, इसका एक ही मतलब है, equals unequally and unequals equally. Not everyone is having, yes, first line is discrimination, second line is also discrimination. Okay, unequals. Like all of you are not graduates. There are some UGs also. All of you have passed plus two. So when all of you have passed plus two, then suppose can you be tested in a test with a plus two kid who is studying the same subject, maybe political science? Someone who took arts in 10 plus 2, he or she learned political science from NCRT books, or maybe some have this private books, and they read it in their 11th and 12th. They appeared for their board exams. Now you are reading it for your optional. You are studying it for your optional. Can he or she equal you? Absolutely not. So if they are tested in the same test, you and the plus two kid are tested on the same test, if they are facing the same questions, that would be unjust. That would amount to treating unequals equally, because you are unequal. You are not having the same, you are having more knowledge than a plus two kid on political science. This I can assure you. We have been learning this subject for considerable time now, I guess. So you are knowing more than what a plus two kid knows studying the same subject. So you and the plus two kids are unequal. So if the test is same, that would amount to treating unequals equally. Come on, if you ask any cricketer from your state, yes, VVS, correct. How can I forget? I used to love him. He used to play. I do, I do. I don't watch now. So if VVS is taken to a football field and he is there for Dravid is from Karnataka. You are in Andhra Pradesh, right? You're in Hyderabad. Acha, maybe you are from Karnataka. Okay. So if VVS Lakshman is taken to a football ground and after a match, conclusion would be he is a very terrible player. Come on, you are making a cricketer play football and then you are saying he's a terrible player. That would be treating unequals equally. Did you understand this? So Aristotle views on justice is same, that do not treat unequals equally. And yes, someone rightly said that this is the basic assumption for reservation policy in India. Yeah, fish climbing a tree story, right? Do not judge a fish by its ability to climb on a tree. Do not judge a VVS Lakshman on how he plays football. Do not treat unequals equally. And this is the basis for reservations in India. This is the basis of affirmative action or positive discrimination or intelligible differentia anywhere in the world. Okay, blacks are given some special rights or were given some special rights in USA. That's a part of what I just said: positive discrimination, affirmative action, or intelligible differentia. Okay, so this is what he says on justice. But how do we understand this? He gives two dimensions of justice: rectifactory and distributive. These two words you need to remember. His theory of justice is also called theory of proportionate justice. Proportionate means in the proportion of the amount, the ingredients, the status that you have, the more we shall see it with an example, you will understand it better. Yes, equity, actually the correct word. Compensation should be proportionate to the harm. Okay, compensation should be proportionate to the harm. This is what proportionate justice means. This is what rectifactory theory means. This is what distributive also means. But why his rectifactory and distributive justice is called proportionate justice? Because justice must be done in accordance with the harm that has been inflicted upon. Okay, what do insurance companies do? You fill a premium every year, and then if God forbid there is an accident that you meet up with, you ram your vehicle somewhere, you claim insurance. So that amount is proportionate to the harm that is done. And how are guilties being punished by the courts until you are a Prashant Bhushan? 1 rupee fine. Okay, so how it is, how the guilties are punished in accordance with the crime that they have committed, right? Today we saw an exception. I don't know why, but we saw. So distributive is through legislature. Rectifactory means that let there be a redressal mechanism for grievances. You are not happy with anything the government is doing, so you need to vent it out, and that needs to be heard. So where do you go? You go to the courts, file a case against the government. There have been so many cases against the government. Okay, and then if you are guilty, have you heard about scientist Mr. Nambiar? I am sure you must have. I'm told most of you are from very good engineering and medical colleges. Scientist Nambiar, जानते हैं आप इनको? कौन नहीं जानता है? Anyone who is not aware about him? Yes, ISRO scientist, correct. ऐसा कोई है? Anyone who is not aware about him? Mala, he was a scientist working for ISRO. He was arrested by the Kerala government. Okay, to those who don't know, he was arrested by the Kerala government. When he was arrested, I guess some 20 years back, right? Am I right? In 1993, yes. He was arrested on some very, you know, kind of very intense charges, like he is working against national security. He has leaked grave charges, yes. He has leaked information to the enemy. Suppose an ISRO scientist being accused of something, and in 1993 he was arrested. And the case went on, the investigations went on. And when the state frames you, mind my words, when the state frames you, there is a very dim chance that you can escape if you are guilty. Because then the police, the investigating agencies, they will act very seriously, very proactively. The coordination between the agencies will be impeccable. The state police, the CBI and ED and so on and so forth. Okay, 2 years back, I think 2 or 3 years back, he was absolved of all the charges. He was not at all guilty. So from 1993 to you add 15 to 20 years. 2017 or 18, he was let free, and court said compensate him. You have ruined his 20 years, 15 years, of course, and he was compensated with 1 crore rupees. Okay, and he was dropped by the police vehicle. The same police people used to take him. He was handcuffed. He was an accused. Now he was let free. So proportion, what is justice? When justice compensation is proportionate to the harm. But you see, maybe I don't know, I cannot weigh the quantum of compensation with the torture that he would have gone through. A law abiding citizen, a scientist working for ISRO, working for his own country and his countrymen for 15 years, he is being called a traitor, and all the fault adjectives are used, and then 1 crore is given. I don't think the mental trauma can be compensated with monetary amount. And what about the scientific contributions that he would have made? He would have contributed something in ISRO. Not everyone can join ISRO. It's a very tough process. I hope you know. Yes, he was given Padma Bhushan, but all these laurels and all these Padma's award and all these compensation amount and the love that he's getting right now, can it compensate for the scientific loss that ISRO had? It cannot. Okay, right? Colonel Purohit, of course, you have heard this name. Colonel Purohit has been uh, taken back in the army. But what about 8 years of torture that he felt? He had already busted a Lashkar module when he was framed on the charges of saffron terror. And only last year he was absolved of all the charges. So he's back in the army. But can they compensate for what happened, the intelligence input that he was gathering for the army? That has been compromised in all these 8 years. So that's why Aristotle says that compensation should always be in proportion to the harm that is done. And rectifactory is that there has to be a mechanism. Just now I gave you an example. I gave you so many names: Colonel Purohit, this scientist Nambiar, and distributive is through legislature. Rectifactory, something wrong has been done, you go to take the legal route. Redressal will happen. Distributive, government will make such policies that wrongs will be undone. Legislature, reservation, Article 17 banning untouchability would come here. These all are legislative methods. Public policy making, again same thing. Government giving a kind of subsidiary to few castes preparing for civil services exam. Do you know this? Government runs institute for some caste who are preparing for, especially the SC/STs who are preparing for civil services. So again, that is through policy making. So here also proportionate just policy should be used, is what Aristotle is saying. You understood his view on justice, Aristotle's view on justice now? See again, let us wait for Article 14 and reservation in IGP. Let's not go into the details. I just give an example that fits here. That's it. We are not discussing the comparative uh, merits and demerits of reservation here. It will fit into Aristotle's definition. That's why I said it. We have to study it anyhow, but later. Now moving on. Two people having same merit should be rewarded equally. Else there will be a feeling of distrust towards state that might lead to rebellion. Again, who is saying this? Aristotle is saying this. What is he saying? That if there are two types of people who are having same amount of merit, often it is seen that two people are of equal caliber, so both of them should be rewarded equally. It's not like you reward someone with give more reward to someone and less to other. When both are equal, what will happen? Distrust will start brewing up. Okay, the one who will receive less despite having the uh, same ingredients will have all the reasons to antagonize himself from the government or the state, and then distrust will start. The individual will be antagonized from the government, and then that might lead to rebellion. Why rebellion happens? Because people think that we have been denied of something that rightfully belongs to us. Correct? Whole plot of Bahubali. Okay. Yes. I have seen Bahubali. All of us have. What was his name? who used to drive that chariot? Bhalla Dev. Yes, Bhalal Dev. So he used to think that I am same as Bahubali, right? He used to think that I am same as Bahubali. He used to think so. And because he was not awarded the crown prince title, so he has the conspiracy and became the king. Yes. Okay, so then see how minutely Aristotle is observing anything, everything, and then giving a very, very balanced views on these things. He's rightfully saying that in the long run, if you want to have a very, profound impact on people, if you want to have something that you can make good policies only when your people are with you. If they rebel against you, the king will have nothing to do. Sooner than later, he will be thrown away. He said that let us address these basic issues first through justice. State should not treat unequals equally. Higher the contribution, greater the award. Now he's not saying that make enabling provisions like reservation, okay, or affirmative action. He's saying the one who is contributing more should be rewarded high. Okay, so if you are contributing more for the society, for the country, then you should be rewarded more. Army canteens are free of all taxes. This can be an example. Yes or no? Because whatever you do, you cannot say that the conditions in which the army performs and does their work, because they have to pay. If there is a error, what will happen? The life will be gone, and for whom they are willing to sacrifice their life for us. So this is a very small token gesture, right? So the thing is that more progressive tax again that would not fit here because that is taken by the government. Aristotle is saying someone who is doing more, give him more, reward him more, give him higher positions in the darbar. Okay. Now you see, Aristotle does not support absolute equality. There cannot be absolute equality at all because people differ the way they are as an individual. So how can there be absolute equality? So he's saying that there are not equal people. Not every individual is equal to the other. Let us compensate proportionately. That would bring the right kind of justice. All right. His theory sounds rational, but can't be applied in India where there is no level playing field. So a comparative analysis I have tried to do because you can get a question. What is Aristotle's view on justice? And then you will get uh, examine his views on justice in the context of contemporary Indian society. So don't justify. However virtuous you are, however talented you think you are, do not say, because again, India, the Constitution itself says that unequals will not be treated equally. We'll come to it. Right to equality, Article 14. We have to see in great depth. So he sounds practical. He sounds rational. For that, there are certain prerequisites to create such a field. Let everyone be on the same pedestrian. Then we will talk about Aristotle. Then we'll try to justify view of justice. So when people are not equally paced, there is such a kind of rough work done. Okay, rough fault lines are emerging in India. Then we cannot say that compensate more the one who is contributing more. What we would say, compensate, make provisions for someone who has been marginalized. Did you understand? See, Aristotle is not sounding the way Indian Constitution sounds. He is saying that the one who contributes more should be compensated. And just now someone gave an example of progressive taxation. So that would be completely opposite, right? Did you understand or not? Do not get confused with enabling provisions that democracies are up to. See, he's not talking about welfare of slaves. Try to understand this. He's talking from a point of view of a noble, an aristocrat. He's talking about maybe a high army general who is defending Athens. He's not talking about slaves. He abhors slaves. He is saying, like, if I were to apply his idea of justice on India, then the more contribution, like someone who is running a lot of factories and companies, should be exempt from taxes. Instead, we have progressive taxes, right? The more you earn, the more you pay. But the more you earn, the more people you are employing, right? The more companies and factories you have, the more employment you are generating. So, according to him, you should be exempt. Should be something done because you are doing something good for the society. You are contributing to the nation building. That's not happening. We are going for affirmative action. We are trying to lift the vulnerable, the marginalized. As totally saying, favor those who are already on a favorable position. Sounds elite. Did you understand? All of you? No confusion remains. Polity is best practicable form of government is what he's saying. What does this statement mean? Polity is golden mean between two extreme oligarchy and democracy. Do you know what is oligarchy? Anyone who knows what is oligarchy? Never read about it. Who are oligarchs? PM Oli. Yes, small group of people having control. PM Oli is nowadays a butt of jokes after he said that Ramji was from Nepal. So everything is from Nepal, right? Actually, Oli means small group, privileged group, elite group. So when a small group decides for everyone, that is oligarchy. Democracy is that we decide for ourselves. So polity is the golden mean between two extremes. Now he disapproves democracy also. Yes, China is oligarch. Yes, China is more like a dictatorship. No, how would lobbying come here? What has lobbying got to do with this? Even farmers lobby that. You understood what is oligarchy? Now, oligarchy represents extreme wealth. Democracy is ruled by many, so it will also be rule of ignorance and poverty because oligarchy represents extreme wealth. So these extreme wealthy people will always favor extreme wealthy people. Correct, Anirudh? Your meaning is correct. So oligarchy is bad because few people, resourceful, extremely wealthy, rich people will control everything. That would not do good. Democracy is also bad because democracy means ruled by many. Everyone will have an opinion. So ignorant will also have an opinion. Okay. Men without reason will also have an opinion. So that is one of the reasons, and this is one of the major criticisms of democracy. That in democracy head counts. But whether that head contains wisdom or not is immaterial. Correct. So that is what politics combines good features of both and removes bad features of both. Both here means oligarchs and Democrats. So democracy, he is taking good points from both and he is ignoring, he is not inculcating the bad features from both these forms. Monarchy can lead to tyranny, which is worst form of government. Tyranny, absolutism. One person, China is tyranny because of almost he is monarch now, right? He has elevated himself to the level of Mao Zedong. He will remain the lifelong president of Communist Party. Xi Jinping. North Korea is one. Of course, North Korea is one. So it will lead to tyranny, which is worst form of government. One individual with unchecked power, no accountability, no responsibility. Don't ask why, just do and die. So that is worst form. Aristotle says democracy is second worst form. Okay, because people select demagogue. Who is demagogue? A political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using rational arguments. So he says that democracy is like, people can be easily fooled. People can be passionate appeals can be made and mainstream things will be highlighted and then someone will become very kind of demagogue that because he raises these issues and he talks about them, so let us please bring him to power. So he will cater to the prejudices of the people. Okay, so that's why he's saying that democracy is also not a good thing, but then monarchy is the worst thing. No questions here. Do you have any questions in this slide? I don't guess that you have any doubts. We are coming to it, but how will someone become ruler? We are coming to it. But now he just now told us that these are the issues with both forms, the worst and the second worst. So we are, according to him, living in the second worst. Now please write a line. I have written here, write a line. Please write a line. You all have pen and papers. Aristotle believes that inequality inequality in its extreme form, inequality in its extreme form will do no good. A society, after full stop, you write, a society will will be very stable if a society will be very stable if it will have more middle class people, more middle class people. A society will be more stable when it will have more middle class people. How? Because middle class will be not very wealthy. Okay, further you write, then I'll spell it if there is a doubt. Therefore state should make attempt, therefore state should make attempt to remove poverty, to remove poverty, because poverty is linked with ignorance, poverty is linked with ignorance. Okay, aristotle also aristotle also recommends Aristotle also recommends that rich people should contribute to charity to remove poverty and inequality. Remove poverty and inequality. Now you understood? So policy should be such that middle class comes, rich starts to donate, then the ruler will be safe. There will be no kind of popular revolt or rebellion or uprising against him. Is it all right? Now you see. Aristotle is one of the first to stress the importance of middle class in creating a stable and lawful political system. His insights is as valid today as it was in 4th century BC. Now again, you can be given a question. This very statement can be in your main exam, and you can be asked, how is it relevant in contemporary times? Or how do you see the utility of this statement that Aristotle made some 400 years before the birth of Christ in today's contemporary time? Tell me, how do you see it? Not exactly. See, read this. That importance of middle class in creating a stable and lawful political regime. No, no, no. No, I'm not asking you for the explanations that we already have. That that is why Aditya, what you have written is correct, but that is why he opposes monarchy, absolute power to monarchy. He calls, that is why he opposes oligarchs. You have, what Aditya has written is the reason why Aristotle is against the oligarchies. How is this true? So where are the unstable regimes of the contemporary times? Let us derive the argument. Let us derive our conclusion. I have asked you a question. Where are the unstable regimes of contemporary times? Tell me the name of the countries. Pakistan, Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan, and all these countries. What is the position of middle class? Do we have a middle class in Iraq or Syria or Levant or Afghanistan? Do we have a middle class in Venezuela? Do we have middle class in Sub-Sahara? We don't have. Correct. Or for that matter, Palestine, we don't have. And this line true. Modern political scientists believe that chronic political instability of underdeveloped countries is caused by lack of middle class. Okay, lads, everywhere it is same. Most of the countries that we have named, they don't have middle class at all. In these areas, there are small wealthy oligarchs. Like in Iraq, you had Saddam and his sons and his brothers and his nobles. In Syria and Iraq, again, still we have the same oligarchs, Assad and everyone. In Iran, you have the Ayatollahs. In Pakistan, you have many oligarchs, the army, the ISI, the political establishment. Sub-Saharan, what was happening in, have you heard the name of Idi Amin? Have you heard the name of Colonel Gaddafi? Castro's? Who were they? They were oligarchs in their own country. Okay. Wealth was confined to 50 to 100 people who were close to the likes of Gaddafi's and Castro's and Idi Amin's, and rest of the country was poor. Abject poverty, class conflict, and political instability are inevitable consequences. It's bound to happen. Bound to happen. How long will you rule? How long will you rule? Okay. Russia used to talk about, not Russia, USSR used to talk about the socialist revolution, the Bolshevik revolution. 1917, the revolution occurs. 1991, USSR collapses. Why? See the palaces in Kremlin. See what Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin did there. Okay, it's bound to go someday. Something similar might happen in China. And all his ministers are having umpteen resources. You know, they have palaces, they have foreign accounts, they have $1 billion business running in European and American countries. So this is bound to give rise. Okay, and same can be said about the African countries, the sub-Saharan countries. The rulers used to live a life of luxury, and all these people there were kind of poor and suppressed. That's why we see the Arab Spring coming in 2011. You know, Arab Spring started from Tunisia, went on to Egypt. What was happening in Egypt under Hosni Mubarak? Same thing was happening. Isn't Aristotle right? And isn't the theory still relevant? It is. Aristotle's emphasis on political importance of middle class is credited to his insights into the real practical dimensions of politics. We have always maintained that Aristotle is way more practical than his guru Plato. Okay, so he sees that you cannot push people into oblivion. You cannot make them scared, and people have rebelled against the worst of the dictators, right? Libya, Colonel Gaddafi was lynched by his own men. Do you know this? He was lynched by his own men, someone he ruled for more than 30 years. Okay, so Aristotle understands that it is very important for middle class to emerge, because middle class will dilute extreme poverty. It will empower people. It will give some resources in the hands of people. It will make people happy that they are living to some extent a content life. Then they will not blame the government. Okay, the very relevant stuff he talked about. Are we okay with this? All of us? Okay. All yes. Law is reason without passion. Another Aristotelian statement. Aristotle said this for Plato's Philosopher's King. Plato gives absolute power to his philosopher king. He said, for no law or ordinance is mightier than knowledge. This is what Plato says. Because his philosopher king is the epitome of knowledge, so he will decide what is law. Because as for Plato, no law or ordinance is mightier than knowledge. Now Aristotle will challenge this. Aristotle favors rule of law instead of rule of person. Let there be rule of law. He favors generalized concepts. Plato is saying, no, my personal philosopher king is a repository of entire wisdom. So whatever he says is the law. Aristotle says, no, let there be a written law. Let philosopher king also abide by that. Philosopher king, despite being a man of reason, will still have some passions. Now, passions are not guarded by reason. Okay, people worshipping Rajnikant have no reason but passion. So there isn't a guarantee that passion will not dominate reason. It can happen to philosopher king also. It can happen to philosopher king as well. That his passion will get better of reason. Rule of law is best practicable. Aristotle does not sacrifice good for best. That's why he said that let there be a rule which everyone has to obey, even the philosopher king. Because he is after all a human, there must be some element of passion. That passion can get manifested. His reason will be curbed. So let there be a rule which everyone will follow. And let us not wait for what Plato has said, that the best philosopher. No, let there be good. We can ignore the best. Okay, for wanting best, we will sacrifice good with absolutely no certain stuff that we are getting best. Okay, did you understand this point? Plato himself has modified his view in the book The Laws, where he accepts that rule by philosopher king is impractical. Any questions here? Please ask. Only then I'll proceed. Law will be made by the state. King is a part of state. His nobles will contribute. His bureaucrats will contribute, and he also will contribute. No, Plato did not accept Aristotle thought, but later on in his other work, the laws, because he is writing on laws, so he wants a law which even the philosopher king will abide by. Anything else? All of you understood it or not? He said law is reason. Okay, law is not passion. That's why it's sad to see that Supreme Court has not stood for itself today by saying 1 rupee fine to Bhushan. If there is a defamation, if he is guilty of contempt, punish him. Why doing these symbolisms? Why showing passion instead of reason? Okay, if he is guilty of contempt as pronounced by the highest court, let there be punishment. It's not like I hate Bhushan. Of course, I don't like him. But the thing is that what is the impression that apex court has given? That anyone can mock the highest court of the land and get away with 1 rupee fine. Supreme Court, whatever the Supreme Court says has effect. The impression that they have given that you can mock the court, you can held guilty, you can be held guilty for the contempt and still get away with it. Not a good thing. Okay, law must be reason, not passion. Okay, shall I move this? It is said that Aristotle's ideal state is Plato's second best state. Because what would be ideal for Aristotle? Rule of law, philosopher king following that law. Plato's philosopher king is beyond any reason, beyond any law, whatever he says. What is Plato saying? For no law or ordinance is mightier than knowledge. Who is the repository of entire knowledge? The philosopher king. Okay, and he wants Athens to be an ideal state. Plato is saying, no, this would be the ideal state. What would Plato react to it? That this is second best. Mine is the best. Because my philosopher king, super cop without reproach, right? Until he wrote the laws. So that is why it is said that Aristotle ideal state is Plato's second best ideal. We are done. Ask your questions now. As interesting as it might sound, at times it can get complicated. Yes, Plato is idealist. I told you, even Aristotle is idealist, but less than his guru. Don't be an idealist, okay? Never be an idealist. There is no ultimate aim. He has talked about different things simultaneously. More we will see in the next class. Aristotle is not finished yet. See, ruler, we have not seen it, how the ruler is chosen, because they have, none of them have, charted a process. Mona, Plato has charted a process, right? Careful meeting of ablest men and women, and then anonymity be given to the newborn kids, and then philosopher king at 50. Aristotle would say slightly different. We shall see tomorrow, but I'll give you a very brief introduction about it. That heredity will work when there is a rule of law. Whosoever becomes the king, we have a constitution now, right? So whosoever is the prime minister of India has to obey it. So immaterial how a philosopher king is chosen, how rigorous the process is. Of course, he must be having some reason within him. He must be having some intellect within him, but then he has to follow rules. So irrespective of who becomes the king, the rule of law will be followed. Anirudh, who asked this? Aditya, okay, you have got it. Anirudh has a question. Mistreatment of slaves. No, they don't have reason. Aristotle assumes that women and slaves are not having reason. They don't have reason to rebel. He says where will rebellion occur? When two people having same ingredients are given unequal treatment. This is there on slide, okay? Slaves have nothing. Slave and women have nothing worthy. The ingredient is very low. Okay, poor people, hungry people, how Britishers used to call Indians. So slaves cannot rebel. They don't have courage. They don't have reason. Same applies to women. Rebellion will occur when equals are treated differently. Okay, someone having same amount of wisdom and government is treating them unequally, that would result in rebellion. Is it all right? No. Again, what was this question again? Let me again open it. Aristotle assumes masters have enough reason to provide slave equal treatment. See, there is no provision for equal treatment among slaves. All of them have really low amount of reason or and total absence of reason of slaves. So whatever you do, because he will be in company of his master, he will learn virtues from the masters. The more he devotes himself to his master, the more he learns. This is the Aristotelian view on slave. And yes, master will decide which slave will remain more close and which slave will not remain. So more or less, they will be in the what do you call it, shadow of their respective masters. That is how they will learn. That is how they will also develop virtues. No, not entirely from slaves. Not entirely from slaves. Some slaves who have acquired certain amount of virtues, then there are farmers, there are businessmen, all of them will be well off. And slaves, again, slave can remain a slave, still can be a middle class. It depends on the income. So give him something more if he's having some qualities. Don't make everyone slaves. And the other group, ruling class. Let there be something in between. Okay, Nirudh? Not all slaves will be middle class, but then not all slaves should remain slaves also. Okay, then, good night to all of you. We'll meet tomorrow.